Yung anak, salamat. Welcome salamat. Kinain, magets. Please give me new. Tumakat lo.
Yung Gitxsan. Before we start, we will ask the Creator for a blessing for this group, other people. We also ask for a minute silent after the prayer for we lost another member in the village. Dear God, Lord Jesus, we thank you, Lord, for this morning. We thank you for each day that you give us, and we continue to pray for that. I pray, Lord, that you be with us today to do the job, trying to better our lives and our neighbors. I pray that you be with all the people here, that you spread your Holy Spirit around everyone. Set our footsteps in the right path, that with one heart, one mind, that we work together, that things will go smooth. And however, Lord, that we continue to show compassion towards each other. This I pray to you through Lord Jesus, my Lord and our Lord. Amen.
Kinain ka magets. Ibugong. Manas lawit. Ano ba yun? Pagsab.
Aywa, udah semigat siya mana kabuus semilukul gusay kagodam masulam niyam godam yol smogit kidan max wala mulo di skilwat kitun ka niyam godam nit satun will تم دام شوام خيوك تم تلخنيش لسماك شوت ويا لسارة I'll speak English so everybody understands what I'm saying. It's very extraordinary that we continue meeting today. Like one of the chiefs are deceased, and it's not like us to meet at the time of death, but we see it, the extraordinary attention that the fish needs so, and we know that your high-level government people will be lucky to rebook you in the next 6 months. So there's some logistical problems there as well. So we Gitxsan's family has agreed to let us go ahead with this because of the importance of the fish crisis as we see it, and we thank them for that, and we also remember Carl. He's a member of Shimogit Luce's family, I believe, and we thought that we would open like this because it's a very extraordinary thing and over an extraordinary subject. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
So this time I'd like to ask you to rise and we do a minute of silence. Loved ones that are left us. So I want to acknowledge Gitxsan for the family to allow us to gather here today. So you have an agenda in front of you. Welcome to our elective, an opening prayer, roundtable introductions, review of January 29, 2019 Crisis Management Team meeting minutes, nomination for chair and co-chair, discussion and decision if an external facilitator is required for the crisis management team, open discussion around the creation of an administrative tribunal. This panel would address the individual rights of the Gitxsan and the individual rights of the sports fishers that acquire a fishing license. Open discussions around the creation of an inspiration award. This would be an annual award given to a local person that demonstrates leadership in terms of knowledge of the Gitxsan fisheries tenure, proving to be positive influence on local fish and fish habitat restoration and rehabilitation projects, leader in the community in terms of promoting sustainable fish population in the Skeena, etc. 11:30, open discussions around shared objectives for the 2020 fishing season, trespass, access, communication, conflict management, etc. Set the next meeting date, and 12, closing remarks and prayer, and we will have lunch coming in before you travel into your next direction. So at this time, I would like to start with roundtable introductions. I'll start to my left.
My name is Art Wilson, and my hereditary chief name is Wimuglish, and I'm one of the wolf chiefs in Ansvaya or Kispiaks, and glad to be here. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Gordon Sebastian. We'll welcome you here today, Colin and Amy, and also Patty. I hold a law degree. I practiced law for about 31 years in the areas of criminal and family law. In our house, we also have another lawyer, Norman. He'll tell you more about it when he speaks. But we're here, we're both trained to look at the situation and to resolve it so that both parties are satisfied. We basically look at a situation and keep everybody's interests at the table and no one loses. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Patty Hirschfield. I work for the province of BC, more specifically the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development. Work out of the Smithers office. It's my second time meeting, and I want to thank you all for the invitation, and it's an honor to be here today talking with you about the crisis management team and the work that we'd like to undertake on fisheries management.
I'm here to get to mana commercials. My name is Sakhamirog, Eagle Clan, Lachskeek, Vernon Smith, originally from Gitxsan, and I'm very interested in this project, and hopefully we have a good discussion this morning. Condolences to the family bereaving family, and thank you all.
Gitxsan Gitxsan. My given name Robert Campbell. Small name is Himinu. The name comes from Kispiak, but I live in the village of Gitxsan. And I'm very interested what the input and output of this meeting is going to be regarding our fish, called it fish tenure, because depletion of our salmon all along the Skeena. We welcome the visitors that represent BC and pets. Come down.
Morning, everyone. My name is Chaz Ware. I'm the Environmental Services Manager for Gitxsan Environmental Services. I grew up in Terrace. My family's from Kispioks. My dad's Gitxsan. My mom's not. My dad's mom was the late Shirley Ware, and her sister was late Norma Barnes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Robin Alexander. Chief name Wiskin Mitigukla, Gisgas. And I'm part of the crisis management team. And I'm also looking forward to this day for resolving our matters. Thank you.
My name is Norman Moore. I have two chief names. One is from Gitxsan, that's Nola. The other one is from Gitxsan, Molchan. And as Gordon said, I've got my law degree. I've had it for a number of years. I'm very fluent in our language. I'm well versed in Canadian law, and I'm well versed in our culture and our laws. I'd like to welcome all the visitors here, and it is my hope that we could come to some kind of an agreement, because our people are suffering, and that's one of the things that I stand for. Justice. Justice. That's what I stand for. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Colin Masson, and I work for Department of Fisheries and Oceans. I'm the area director in the North Coast here. And just as an opening comment, I want to apologize for getting here a little bit late. That's my fault. I got to Terrace late last night. Didn't have a great night, so apologize for being late. I also would just like to pass on my condolences to the community's individual families with the loss that you mentioned, and appreciate the fact that we are still meeting today. That doesn't go unnoticed. I appreciate that. And I also have appreciated some of the comments around the room about things that are critically important to yourselves in terms of focusing on food and the resource and sustainability. And it just strikes me that even from these very few opening words, that there's much that we all have in common. That's for sure. And I look forward to exploring that. And I would also just say as a prefacing comment that from Fisheries and Oceans perspective, we're pleased to be here, but we are here a little bit more of as an observatory role to try to understand the issues from your perspective and where you're coming from, so that we can best determine how to engage with yourselves as we move forward. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Amy Wakeland. I work for fisheries out of Prince Rupert with the North Coast as well. I'm the Aboriginal Affairs Advisor, so I oversee the group that works with your fisheries department on their AFS agreement and things like that. Like others, I want to express my condolences to the families, and I think that it speaks volumes to how important this subject is that you're dealing with us today. So my heart goes out to you. I'd like to hear that talking about balance and interests, and that's usually where I come from as well. So thank you.
I don't know which title to start with here. My name is Gitxsan. Gitxsan from Kispi office. One of our fishing holes that we hold dear to us is called Angodish. And we have used this, and have been passed down to us from many families within Gitxsan. And my predecessor, Chris Skulls, was former Gitxsan. Before that, it was Walter Skulls. And before that, Samuel Wesley. And that's as far as I can recall at this point. I believe there are more. But I'm also the chair today to help conduct the business as we proceed to move ahead. I also chair the Gigani Sim Giget, and bring the information to the group as we process each meeting that we conduct for our nation. So I've met Patty before when I was a former band manager for Kispiox. I believe we're trying to look at rod days, and so I've also run into Patty in soccer rivalry. My grandson plays against his team. So it's a small world. Of course, I've known Colin for the last 50 years, I think. Worked,
Don't think it's 50.
That brings me joy to hear you say that, actually.
Maybe.
No, but I was the project manager for the Kispiox. So I wanted to have some program where Colin was the DFO representative, along with a number of other workers from fisheries. So I've heard your name and mentioned a couple of times, Colin. It's nice to finally see you again.
Yes, it is. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. And Amy, thank you for coming along, and we welcome the guests that have come today. And the Simgiget are here to look at the crisis on fish tenure for the Skeena River. And, I'll just leave it at that for now, and again, welcome. So on our agenda, we have the January 29th crisis management team minutes for a quick review of what was covered. Linda, would you like to go through the minutes with us?
Read the whole thing.
I think the big things are to, talk about the tasks that were assigned, if they were completed or not. And then everybody can do a good read on their own.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you've got all the names of everyone that was in attendance at that meeting, and if I've missed anyone, please let me know. And on the review of the fish plan. That's when Gordon let everybody at the table know who was the Gates chair and the directors, and the ones for the Gagana chair. And one task was for Gordon to extend an invitation to a DFO representative for the next meeting. So. And the second task was for Chaz and Patty to extend an invitation to BC and the federal government to meet, and crisis management team to extend an invitation to DFO to meet with them. So that's kind of a duplication with what Gordon had said. And the next task is Chaz Ware to provide information to Patty Hirschfield re the crisis management team process and costs associated with orientation in terms of reference for this process. And another task, set date in March for Gitxsan 201 session with the $10,000 budget. Next task, orientation meeting date to be set after meeting with Canada.
Thank you, Linda. Any comments on the minutes?
So I think we've got a date of March 15th for the Gitxsan 201.
Yes.
Okay. So we're in the process of organizing staff to
Okay.
Did we extend the invite to the DFO as well for the 201 on March 15th?
That would be great. Your staff be
So,
available.
Understand a little more clearly what the 201 is proposed. Will that emerge through the course of today's discussion? Can we come back and visit that, or does it make sense to talk about it now?
I can touch a little bit on it. So we had a session, we called it bringing forth the Gitxsan Ayok to ministry staff. So we had Ministry of Flynn-Roe, Ministry of Environment, I believe Ministry of Mines come to a session where we presented a little bit of information about who the Gitxsan are, what processes we use as a nation. And we wanted to share with the ministry that all too often there's questions, well, how did you make this decision? How is your culture put together? How does this system work? Primarily to try to look at the decision-making process of the Gitxsan people and what we use as a guideline that we have our ayok, our laws, we have our wolchiens, our history, we have our chan, our totem poles, then we have our gula, which carry our strength, and we have a WILP system that provides guidance for us as Simogis, as Simgiget, that we carry the business that we do, and that has never changed. And we also identified a little bit about our anat, our fishing holes that we hold dearly for our families, and carry that process through. So that's a little bit of Gitxsan 101 that we had put together with the watershed facilitators and also with Gitxsan Chief's Office staff, Gordon Sebastian, and Elizabeth Sampson participated in that. And we had, like, I believe 37 staff here from the ministries that we kept down for about 5 hours. And so the Gitxsan was referred to as 201. We'll probably change that to 102 because of the complexity of the traditions of our inheritance. So Abby has indicated through a real interest in furthering the Gitxsan teachings that we have and that we want to share with different ministries and want to help the ministries and the federal understand who the Gitxsan are. So that's the brief of. Any addition, comments?
Yes.
Norman?
Okay. It's 102 would be the same as 101 because you two are different people from the previous people who came.
Yes.
So you're going to have to start right from the beginning again and teach. It's teaching you to understand the Gitxsan. And I was in negotiations with the government at one time. And at that time, I had a number of meetings where I explained the house system and our house system to them, the different laws involved. I took them through the whole thing, and it wasn't taped, but you know that's what 101 is and 102.
Thank you, Norman. Hope that's helpful, Colin.
That's extremely helpful, and it sounds like an extremely useful and important session. And so we will certainly have some internal discussions about how we can get some participation. I do know that date's going to be tricky for myself, although I would like to find some way to kind of get up to speed, but we will figure it out, right? We'll try and see what's doable and have some, keen to have some participation to get to that point of learning. I'm hoping to glean little bits today as well. But it's important for us to understand that because clearly our lack of understanding in government leads to misunderstanding about what to do best, how best to do it. And so we have to understand and where you come from and how you work and functions. It sounds really useful, very important. I'm wondering if there's any documentation from the previous session that we had. Is there any notes or anything like that that would help us to start the process of understanding to some degree?
I can send you documentation that we, 2 slide decks that we utilized. And I believe, and I'm not certain if it's still on there, but it was on CFNR, on their website.
I took a look right after we talked about that. I didn't see anything there. I saw they talked about the session and everything else, but I couldn't find any materials associated with it.
Our communications team is trying to get a copy of that from CFNR and we'll distribute it.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So it's almost 3 hours.
Okay.
So CFNR videoed the entire session, taking out the lunchtime and the breaks. We really strongly believe that what was gathered from that session was very instrumental in moving on with the consultation process with the watersheds. So,
And so in light of not having that history,
yeah,
if I go and put my foot in my mouth without having the knowledge and the understanding, you'll give me a little flexibility and remind me the foot is in the mouth, and I'll take it out and we'll start again.
okay.
Okay.
You're already forgiven.
Okay.
In our law, that means clock, which means you have to put up a feast after.
I've heard this before about a feast.
I'll take that under advisement. Thanks.
Gotta be a big feast here on when he gets done around here. And everybody has to have something.
Very good questions, and so we'll take it into the next part of our agenda, 10 o'clock on August 10th, so we're quite on schedule. So I'll ask Gordon to take the next 3 points to demonstrate. Patty, sorry.
Just before we did that, I just had a question. I see there's materials distributed from the February 7th meeting in Terrace, it looks like. And I was curious, I read briefly through it, if there was any summary that anyone would be comfortable providing on how that meeting went and what was discussed and the linkage of this table to that discussion. Just wanted to have a brief chat on that if it made sense.
Sure. Anyone?
Okay, what happened was the same thing as this. It was roundtable introduction, but there were other nations involved. We were invited there by the Gitxsan Calum. Kitwan Cool was there, and Gitxsan Calum.
Don Roberts.
Oh, Don Roberts, yeah. He was a chair. He was acting chair. He's not the real chair, he said. So what we discussed at that table was we're inviting them to join us in our efforts to get our jurisdiction on the Skeena recognized. That is what we're doing, to get our jurisdiction recognized. And as chiefs, we are going to invoke our Dachgat, and that is jurisdiction on the Skeena. So that is basically what we put forward to Roberts, Don Roberts, and Harry Daniels. So we'll basically go through the same thing today.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Norman. Robert?
Yeah, the whole point of that meeting at Gitxsan Calum was for the Gitxsan fish tenure.
Yep.
But the chair, Don Roberts, let everybody have their say, so we kind of went sideways. But at that time, everybody aired their own grievances, which was supposed to be just fish tenure. We were there for the meeting and to ask our neighbors if they want to participate with us. Because the more you have participation, the more strength you have. Strengthen our cause. You see, depletion of our salmon, the whole Skeena River, right down to the coast. Well, that's where Skeena River comes up, Haysport, and all the way up to Babine. And the other, like Morristown, we asked them to, if they want to participate.
Kenya was supposed to show up today, but I don't see her. Because they said they're willing to. But he's not here. What's his name? Gary Daniels?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the reason why the meetings were at Gitxsan fish tenure. And asking the federal government, BC, see if we can resolve all these issues about fishing permits, fishing guides, trespass on the Gitxsan territory. Maybe I'm going sideways here, but Gitxsan don't recognize Crown land, which the government so famously use all the time. They try to argue with them. And that's what I gathered from that meeting, just to set the thing straight, like Don Roberts, that everybody had their say, so some of them had nothing to do with the fish tenure, but other grievance, how we got to be where we are. Thank you.
Any other comments from anyone that was at that meeting?
One of the major actions at the end of the meeting was have all the nations present commit their support to being a part of that fish forum moving forward. So that was one of the actions that came from it. Everybody signed an agreement saying that they're still involved, or they want to be involved and they want to be a part of it. And this is a separate process.
All right, I'm going to use a blackboard. I'll cover the three areas. Comment, I gathered a bit from Patty that there's going to be work to undertake on the fisheries management, and Colin mentioned that to understand the issues and determine how to engage. So what I'm going to do is focus on the fisheries tenure. I got a black erasure coming, I think. So the Skeena River here, it goes on from the north, comes down, goes along like that. So like this. Well, here's part of my line. It goes down, over, and then you got the Babine. Oh, all dried up. I don't know why they're still here when they're all dried up. And the river goes down. There's the Kispiox, the Bulkley, Babine, the Wet'suwet'en over there, Lake Babine over here, the Talcan, and up here we got the Kenwaga River, and we got the Gitnya. And then here we got the Kitslass and Kitsamkale. So we have the Gitxsan fisheries tenure. The one that I'm most familiar with is this one here and a few up here. And the Gitxsan tenure is an act. Each family, each wilt is logged in here. You have 6, and they're each connected to at least one anak, which is a fishing site, fishing camp. Okay. And then each chief has the lahip, and you'll see the map. The map has the territory. Within the territory is a chief's name and the lahip. So each will owns a tract of land called lahip. When you put that all together, and it totals 33,000 square kilometers. And we got the fisheries tenure, and that's the anat, and that's on the river. And when your family has an anat, no family can trespass. So trespass is always there. It's not allowed. You need permission to go into someone else's anat. And then affecting that, we have fee simple. So people can't get to their fishing sites all along the river. So you could start seeing the crisis that the Gitxsan are in. I'm looking mostly at you, Colin, because I think Patty heard some of this already. And then we have reserves. Reserves that don't allow people to access their anat if they're from another reserve. So you can see how the Indian Act also affects the access. And then we have the railroad. Now the railroad has destroyed some fishing sites. The railroad. So some of the anat have been destroyed. And then you have the highway. And the same thing. And due to the highway, there's a lot of access to the anat. So you could see how severely the fisheries tenure of the Gitxsan is highly restricted. And not even intentionally done by BC or Canada. So the issues of, we're not talking about allocation here, and we're not talking about quota. We don't want to have smartest guy and smartest scientists on our team to fight with you guys, or you guys have your smart people and fight with us. And everybody argues while we wait for lunch, and then they argue all afternoon, and then we go home. And the status quo stays the same. Now to back up here for Colin, what we have is we have 33,000 square kilometers. And it's all the lahip and anat. And there's about 60 head chiefs. We use that 62. And what we have is the Gitxsan government. And that the government deals with the whole territory. But you have to understand that each territory is autonomous. When we join together as the Gitxsan government, they still do not have jurisdiction over anyone else's territory. It stays autonomous. This just means upriver and downriver. But we sort of use it. We sort of use it to, just sort of to keep our direction. In our system, we have 4 clans. And we're not supposed to marry the other clan. I mean, our own clan. Say what? That's sort of a mistake, but it's not really a mistake, eh? We tend to marry our own clan. That's a big law that's broken, eh? And the Gitx and Gigani. Sometimes we even use that as an excuse to marry our own clan. So, but anyway, I'm going off track. So we have 24 head chiefs in the Gitx and 24 with the Gigani. The Gitx are pretty well done now. They probably have a couple more to add. Right here, man. This is the Gitx here, okay? And the Gigani have a few more, quite a few more to add yet. So of this, we have about 20 and 19 chiefs that take part. And there's the other ones, they have their chairs open. They can show up. As soon as they understand that it's the chiefs that's running the government, which we started back in 1982. The chief sued Canada and BC for ownership and jurisdiction. Then in 86, we changed it to rights and title. And then so we're back to jurisdiction now. So what you see here is the chiefs have jurisdiction over their ANAT for your purposes. A-N-A-A-T, ANAT. So when you come here next time, you'll have a t-shirt, you'll have ANAT on there. So that's the way this is going, and more and more we are in a process that started in September of 2017, and the government is now funding this process in terms of rebuilding the Gitxsan nation. And also the province say they have some funding for indigenous government. So we're not under the Indian Act. We're not a band. There's no Indian Act here, no reservation here. We're talking about the territory here, the Lahib, Anat, and each Sawagan. So you're talking to the government here. So what we're looking at with you is for you to have trust in us. For you to understand this, and I'm glad you said you wanted to understand this, so after you leave here today, you can teach Gitxsan 101. I don't know why I think that's a really smart statement from me, but I feel good about it. So we got to build this trust. And we do have weaknesses. We do have chiefs. We have a problem with each other ourselves that we're trying to overcome. There's respect that we're lagging a little bit on that area. Support. So we are really, really, in the actual sense of it, rebuilding. We're rebuilding our connection here. You're not going to have a solid government. So if you want to make a deal with us and you want 100%, that's a good request for you, because you're not going to get a deal then. So if we made a deal with the province of BC today, we're going to ask for 100%. And the province of BC is less than 50% the government. you don't have more than 50%, you actually have less. And we call that democracy. We elected the Liberal government, but somehow with self-made rules, we have the NDP as the government. So we're told, oh, you guys, your hereditary system is not democratic. So we had to deal with that. Brian and I were the negotiators on the Gitxsan table. And we had to deal with the charter with Canada. And we got the guy in that actually wrote the charter. And he came and explained that it's the protection of individual right that democracy is based on. Not whether you elect. So we look at democracy based on election, and BC is in pretty bad shape. The Gitxsan protect the individual right from birth. When a baby is born, you start determining the name. When it's a boy and when it's a girl, there's different processes. And we all know, in the old days, they even knew how the marriage was going to work. So the individual right, each person gets a name, and they're entitled to go to the fishing area or to the lahip as soon as they're born. So that's the right they're born with. And you could see how that's affected on the fishing tenure. Some of them have a right to go here, but they're stopped by fee simple. They're stopped by a reserve. It's been destroyed by the railroad, or you just can't fish there. And as soon as they see us put a campfire by the railroad, the CN police arrive. What are you guys doing here? You're trespassing. So we have competing jurisdiction. So what we're looking at for you with that introduction, and it's more in depth, like each chief here will explain to you different details regarding the ANAC. I'm just giving you the bare bones of our fishing tenure. So when you issue a permit, does that give you a right? Does that give Amy a right when she's got a permit to go fishing wherever she wants on the river? When Patty issues that permit. And when Colin says, oh yeah, there's lots of fish now, you guys can go fishing. Like last year, in May, they said there's no fishing, no fish. And on June 1st, it was open. It went crazy. We had people camped in terrace, camped along the rivers, except on the Gitxsan territory. You had the odd one fishing on the territory. So the chiefs, that process there, has decided to close the fishery, the 2019 recreational fishery. On our minutes, there's typos in there, and you'll see that the actual decision is different. We have the minutes saying that the recreational fishing is now closed. I forget how it went, but take a look at it. The minutes don't say it right. Anyway, oh yeah, it's now. I'm just trying to remember. But we have the actual motions done by the government. They have the actual motions. So those are the decisions that have closed the recreational fish for 2019. And they're addressing this fish fence here somewhere along this river, on the Kilmagar River. We don't want that fence it's a trespass. It's managed by another group. And that group was supposed to be here today. So that's a trespass. The fishing permits are a trespass. And that's no longer allowed for 2019. So what we have here is a stalemate. And the neat thing about this fishery tenure, it's self-policing. And that's very important. It's self-policing. If I'm going to go sneak onto somebody's fishing site, I'm not supposed to do that. I got a fishing site up here. If I go to someone else, sometimes we get greedy and we even chase each other off our own fishing sites. So you'll understand this. We do have weaknesses. We're all humans, so we do things to each other. But the fact is that the permits are trespassing, the fence is trespassing. So we have to deal with those situations. So we're proposing on the administrative tribunal, and we are open to setting it, if that's acceptable to Canada and BC. We are open to calling it whatever you want. We're suggesting ARAP. That's got nothing to do with the Muslims or Sioux bombers or anything like that. It's Aboriginal Rights Access Board, for example. So the tribunal that will be set up by legislation. And legislation will set out exactly what the authority of that tribunal would be. So you take a look at the individual right. Amy's individual right. She paid $20 to go fishing. And she stopped. And if she's respectful and understands the system, she's self-policing. She will not go anywhere unless she asks permission from that chief to get that right to fish. So the Gitxsan government here, this whole group won't be able to give you the right to trespass. You got to seek that permission from each individual will. Each individual will has to agree to give you access on theirs. So you can have areas that you might be able to get to and areas that you may not get to. So you take a look at this and that here. You have the highway, you have the railway. This fishing site used to be right across, but the railway messed it up. So it had to move across. And then you come across here, and you have the Highway of Tears. 19 First Nations women were murdered on this highway. So to have children and women at this campsite, and to have trespassers coming and walking through your camp, it's dangerous. We don't know who they are. Colin comes walking along, he looks like an innocent, honest man.
On a good day.
On a good day. And then if he doesn't shave and has a headache and hung over a little bit and comes showing up, he looks like, geez, I don't know, he looks like he has a criminal record. So so it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough here. And they do a fairly good job.
Gordon has a couple more, well, like he said, another 15 minutes or so that we'd like him to carry on with that. we have to grab something. I'll be right back. But I'm very happy to have the province and the PFO here to witness and understand a bit more of where we're going and how we're going to get there. And we are, as we all say, we already have jurisdiction. We're not asking for jurisdiction. We have it. We have our lucky province calls it Crown Land. We call it our lucky. As Gordon articulated, 33,000 square kilometers. Has been there and will never change. This team you have here is only a part of the Gitxsan governance. This is the crisis management team as selected by Gitxsan and Gagani. And we're working very hard, and we realize that the province and the federal government needs to get up to speed, needs to look at where we're going, needs to understand a bit more. However, we're open and we're transparent. Gordon articulated, we do have our issues. We do have fear. Some of our Simbiget have fear. As I was saying to Colin earlier, Amy, someone doesn't want to get out of my fishing hole and what is, you know, if push comes to shove, it's a text away, and I'll have 100 of my members on the fishing side right now, instantly. I will not hesitate. That's how much we feel for our anat. That's how much we want to protect our anat. It provides to our family, provides to our will, and we are very aware of our yoke. We're very aware of where we come from. And, we talk about our feasts. We spend an average of $30,000 to $50,000 for our feast system, because we've taken care of our own. Half of that goes into the non-native economy, Safeway, Walmart, Workwear World, where we buy goods to take care of our workers, goods to take care of our witnesses. So we put a lot back into the economy. I was just killing space there while you were on there. Yeah, so Gordon would like, well, Gordon is got other things going on, and I don't want to keep him too long. We'll get into the next discussion on the inspirational award.
Can I?
Yes.
Okay. So we got, sige naman, kapawalik sa, I have to bow out, yeah. I got an appointment, so I have to bow out. Okay, Peter Brown brought up a point with me. He wanted us to put 101 on video. So, Gordon, I'm available for that. I'm also available for chair, because I'll be missing that. I'll be available for that. I know the law, Gitxsan law. I know the law of the white man, and that's about it. Thank you very much. And I hope this thing moves forward That is what we're trying to get. Thank you very much.
Nice.
I was told these markers are getting like me.
Sure.
So the authority that we see to assist with the tribunal and the legislation, if that's the way we go, or even policy, this is not dependent on that. This is not dependent on recognition. It's not dependent on legislation for a tribunal. It's a fact. Those chiefs there have made a decision based on their IO. We're not relying on a case like Delgamuuk. We're not relying on Chilcotin. This is a fact of our jurisdiction. So 2019, it's closed to recreational fish. Legate Creek, right up to the headwaters of the Skeena, along the Babine River, along the Bulkley River, right near Boulder Creek West, and up on the Kitwangar River, and right to Kitsalas and Kitsamkalem. And I believe that's Legate Creek. Okay. It's even a little further, but just for clarity, we'll stick with that area. And what we want to do here is you look at the terms of reference. We'd like to have our Canada and BC sit with us, and if we're really serious, which we are, the Gitxsan are, we'd like to set a process to determine a chairperson here at this table, and maybe a facilitator. We can cover the funding of that until March, so that we're not waiting for somebody to approve funding. And we feel that the authority for Canada and BC is in UNDRIP and the reconciliation process of the province. So the terms of reference of our committee sets out a procedure as to what we're going to do. And two items have come forward today. One is the tribunal, ARAB, and the other one is the inspirational award. And we will look at people, Gitxsan and non-Gitxsan, who have shown respect for the fisheries tenure. And that includes self-policing. And it's going to be exciting that if we can all agree on the self-policing process, that's based on respect. We have that already between ourselves. We do that ourselves. Just like hunting. We can't hunt in that huge 33,000 square kilometers area. We can only hunt in our own lahip. So we feel that the inspirational award process might be an indication for people. We have communications here to the public to indicate how it is we want them to learn about the tenure and what's in it for them and for this respect. So that's all I have on this, Brian. Okay. Oh, unless there's questions, any questions?
Yes, and open the floor for questions and comments.
On this issue?
Yes.
We're given the task as crisis management when we first started to ask about Fishgate. What's the purpose? And so far we haven't got no answer. Some of the people ask what's the purpose of the fish fence?
On the Gitxsan?
Anywhere.
Okay.
Because apparently they got one Kaskisgax and Babine and Gitxsan. And they were asking what was the purpose of the fish fence. And so far the only thing I heard the government reply was overcrowding of fish. There's no such thing. Who counted the fish 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago? Who's there to count the fish? Say there's too many that they overcrowd at the spawning ground. They'll find their own way. So anybody have an answer? What's the purpose of a fish fence? So we'll bring it back to the people who requested that we ask and have an answer for that. We appreciate it. Because like they said, nobody was around to count the fish years ago, before the fish fences of the federal and the BC government. We're being punished for things that indigenous people, too many years. Like I had to go to court, guilt by association, because I was with the guy who was fishing. Even though the judge threw it out, I missed work for 3 days because I had to go to court with them. And there was no reimbursement, no apologies from the government. And this has to stop. That's why we ask them that anyone who wants to participate with the Gitxsan, everybody's welcome. Feds, BC, and our neighbors, the surrounding area. So you have an answer for that, why we have fish fence, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Colin agreed to answer the question, provide us reasoning.
Yeah. Brian, I'm going to take a crack at this. I'm just trying to think the best place to start. And I think the start of the conversation is that if we look at the Department of Fisheries mandate, fundamentally focused on working to manage the fishery resource. And bear with me for a minute while I use these words because we could describe them carefully, but to manage the fisheries resource, firstly, to ensure that it's there in perpetuity. That's the clear absolute priority. It always has been, and it's spelled out in policy and in law. That's the key mandate of the Department of Fisheries. Second is to ensure in managing access to the resource, to harvest, that the opportunities for Indigenous groups to harvest for food, social, ceremonial purposes is the priority use of the resource. And it's specifically defined as to ensure that reasonable opportunities are provided to meet the food, social, ceremonial requirements. And I'm not discounting that there's huge debates about that actual negotiation, but let's think about this in terms of fundamental mandate some priorities rather than arguing definitions and so forth. But basically, in terms of managing access and controlling access, the minister has a responsibility to do that in order to ensure the resource is there for forever, for your children's grandchildren and so forth. To manage fisheries resources, you need information. So the fundamental information is, what is the status of a particular resource? What is it made up of? How many individual stocks of fish are there? What's the scope of it? How many numbers? And when we're talking salmon, so let's just zero in, then where do they spawn? Who catches them? How many are required to sustain the stock? It gets into all of those questions that everyone loves to get involved in and debate the specifics of. But I'm not going to talk about specifics, I talk about principles at this stage. But a key part of understanding the resource, the scope and nature of it, is trying to understand what's happening. And in salmon, some of that you can get a handle on, and some of it is very difficult. We call it the black box of what's going on in the ocean. But if we think about salmon, you can determine where they spawn. In most cases, or many cases, you can get an estimate of whether there's a lot, enough, or insufficient. And sometimes we can't even get that, because think of the number of stocks in British Columbia and where they spawn. Impossible. You can also get a handle on who's harvesting what. Particularly, as a premise of fisheries management, the need to understand, and in fact the minister, and bear with me, it's a different worldview than what you've presented, because it doesn't incorporate your principles in your houses, but the principle that somebody in the government is responsible for assigning some way of knowing who's responsible for, who's actually doing the harvesting. Thus the concept of licensing, and licensing, whether it be a commercial fishery or a recreational fishery. And with regards to food social ceremonial, the actual permitting is like something that a nation would do, but the department has a role in trying to understand how that works and what's the scope of that fishery. As part of the overall fishery management picture is you'd like to get an estimate of the abundance of the resource and then who's harvesting parts of it to ensure that there's enough left to spawn and perpetuate the resource into the future. So that's some of the fundamental theories. And then if we get into the specifics of your question about fences and stock assessment tools, fences where you can actually count fish into an area, and ideally by species, and taking biological data so you can start to get ages and timing and so forth, is a really important tool to start to understand what's going on with that particular stock in the context of, for example, the Skeena watershed, and in a broader context, in the context of northern British Columbia with the United States and our international treaties. And so otherwise, the Americans would say, well, we're going to just whale away with our commercial fishing, but they're impacting Skeena and Nass fish and so forth. So we need to have information as a government of Canada.
You're supposed to build a fish fence.
Right. So
protect our fish.
So
by Alaska.
There's lots of innovative solutions. That's not one we've been able to do yet.
Is it working?
Fish wall.
But
Fish
let's talk about some specifics. We'll narrow this discussion down to specifics, because I know you guys know like fundamentals like that, but it's worth just kind of putting it in context. So in the Skeena, when we talk sockeye in particular, there's a large number of stocks. The babbing enhanced stocks make up the bulk of the sockeye production at this point in time. And I know that's an issue, and we could talk fish politics here for all day, but it's important that that babbing fence operate where it does, because it provides a specific count of sockeye that's going through there, and the ability to start to tease apart the stocks that are going to the enhanced streams and the other streams in the area. At the mouth of the river, we have the Tyhee test fishery, which has been in operation for 76 years in a consistent way at the same time every year. And as much as possible, similar or consistent operators on a year-to-year basis. It provides a test. It doesn't count all the fish. It just takes a sample of the fish going through, and it takes a sample of, different mesh size, so different size fish, but it focuses on sockeye. It gives an indication only of which stocks are coming through, which can be also firmed up by genetic information as well as the scales. Which stocks are going through at what time at that point. The Babine fence is 10 days later, I think, the timing to get there, or 2 weeks, I forget the exact time. We'd have people who can tell you. The usual migration time from the test fishery location at the mouth of the river to the Babine fence, let's call it 10 days, and we could argue if it's 14, doesn't matter. But you get a chance to cross-reference a specific number there with an estimated number here, and with the genetic information on the stock, you can start to determine whether the runs are coming in early or late, and whether the abundance estimate at the mouth of the river is verified by what's happening at the fence. So you have an ability to verify an estimate from the mouth of the river with a time delay. Once you start getting fish through the Babine fence, then your estimate here at the mouth of the river becomes more and more accurate. So when the Tyhee test numbers are coming in, when it first operates, the margin of error is significant. The band of error on your point estimate is quite large. But as soon as we start getting cross-referenced information from Babine, then that estimate comes down to quite a useful narrow band. That then enables decisions about any future harvesting to take place, and it starts to give you an understanding of what the spawning population is looking like. The Gitwanga fence, run by the Gitnyao, is a much smaller fence on a smaller system, but again, it provides an accurate count by species in season that starts to be an indication of a smaller population within the Skeena watershed for both sockeye, chinook, coho, and pink, and if they have nature. And so it turns out to be an extremely valuable part of the overall assessment information knowledge base on an ongoing basis for Skeena salmon stocks. So we view the Gitnyao fence as a much smaller scale than Babine, and it doesn't have the same implications for sockeye management that the Babine fence has, but starting to provide, because of the years it's been operating already, very valuable information on what's happening on a year-to-year basis with numbers, which starts to provide a real better understanding. Let's face it, we're still only scratching the surface. Better understanding of what's happening with changing climate conditions, changing water conditions, for which I am assured your history and knowledge would also provide valuable information about what's going on and how these might be varied now and into the future to better inform management decisions. Now, I'm leaving out of all of this all sorts of other information that has to help inform management decisions, not the least of which is the understanding that we have from Indigenous groups. So there are a number of other tools that are used to assess the productivity of salmon stocks in addition to fences, and they're just deemed biological assessment tools, whether it's, catch programs or partial counts on systems at certain times of the spawning year, or counting juveniles on their migration out of the watershed, gives information about the survival in the winter of the eggs and the fry and the smolts and so on. So all of that information goes to understanding what's going on with the particular stocks, and then management decisions around that. notwithstanding and prefaced by the most important decisions are based on ensuring there's reasonable opportunities to meet the Indigenous food, social, civil welfare. So that's the thinking, and that's why, you know, I am sitting here with a completely open mind and doing a real sponge on what I can learn from yourselves. But at the same time, there's little things go up when I hear things. And the bit about the value of some of these assessment projects to yourselves, never mind outside of this table in this room, I think is such that you have to, you know, think carefully about statements about your desire to deal with the trespass of the Gitxsan fence or the role of the Babine fence. I could get into a technical argument. These are valuable bits of information for all of us. And I'd implore you to sort of think about the information values going forward. And those ones, I think, are part of that part. So I'm going to shut up now. You should have cut me off earlier.
I was trying to, but
I know.
I didn't want
Just
to.
tell me
I want to, I'd like to suggest the CPIET here add a little bit to the issue at hand on our not to add to what Gordon has put forward on the table. So I know there's two hands that have come up. I want to keep our eye on the ball.
Okay, I'll speak. All right, everything all said and done. It's good to have everything on paper and all. What we know is what we know from day one, like Gordon said. We inherited our knowledge, wisdom of our lakip. And that, as I was a little kid growing up, I would ask these simple, plain little questions with my grandparents and my mother. I asked, how did you learn how to tell? Delling is making fish strips off your half dry. And they said, my grandmother, and so forth. The teachings been passed down. All this, there was no, I don't know how to explain this. Like, these are our laws. These are our laws of our not. I'm really a lot of respect from our fishing. And our law says not to play with our fish. And well, this has been passed down. Like before I was even born, I was born into this. As Gordon was saying earlier. This has been our ways for thousands of years, and our law proves this. Our own laws prove that our way of life. Like in the cities, there, like in terrace, there, they didn't need no. Back then, you didn't need a permit. You know, you had to have the permit to start a fire just outside your house. Back then it was right there. There's a reason why First Nations are near the waters, the lakes. All our resources are right there. You know, there was no train tracks, there was no main highway, airplanes, all this sophisticated stuff. We were free with our own laws, and we really abided by our laws. It is very important today. I want to see my grandchildren. I have a lot to teach them with our own laws and respect our land. There's a lot for us to do in the future of our grandchildren and all nations, whatever, that needed respect. You know, as growing up, listening to my mom, my granny, about all the stories that I've heard, I can go on all day long, but the stories that I've heard is very important to us. The reason why I've never I can't speak my native tongue now is because my mom went through the Indian day school and she got strapped, whipped, and this and that, the torture there, and fear got into her. And she told me, she made a promise to herself for myself to get fully educated to the Absiwawe so I wouldn't speak my native tongue. But little that she knew that I was going to become who I am today. So I know Gordon was talking about a little bit of fear, this and that, but this is some of the little things that I want to touch upon. But there is a lot more I'd like to say. These are facts. It wasn't, you know, these are not made up history stories. These are all proven facts. We all know our own lucky. We all know our own territories. We all don't trespass on our own territories. My Uncle Roger was very into our tradition, and he says, "You gotta ask permission. Where'd you get your moose?" He says to me. Well, I asked for permission. Did you share that meat with them? Oh yes, I did. Well, that's good. He said, and then he tells me about their laws. He said, "You trespass. Don't you know you're gonna get shot?" He says. Oh, I didn't know. Well, these are our own laws of the land. And the list goes on and on. Let's give somebody else an opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if we really got an answer for my question. All these technical things. What Bertie said about things like that, technicians and others, that's opinion. And just like Robin said, we know the facts. Maybe I'm going on a boundary here. Having seine boats sailing at the mouth of the Skeena, and people sailing up at the Babine Lake defeats the whole purpose of your fish fence. The fish, sometimes it takes longer than 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to go out, even at Gitxsan, for some reason. And after the fish travels all the way up to Babine Lake, and then they sailboat it. That defeats the whole purpose of your fish fence and all your technical know-how. And just like Gordy said, we closed down the river and they all opened it because there's abundance of fish. Yet people along the Skeena are struggling to find fish. And trespassing is one of the things you don't do in our territory. That's cloak. like I told her, you have to put up a feast or a shame feast for doing that. And the reason why I brought that up is, like I said, a typical government reply is all these technical things. Just like Robert said and everybody said, we've been at this for thousands of years. Same with game. We don't overfish. Growing up, the canneries used to run 24/7. And I don't want to see the Skeena and Northwest Coast be like Newfoundland, where all their cod is gone, depleted. They don't even know if they're coming back. That's what we were worrying about. Like Robin said, we have to leave things for our children and the ones that's yet to be born. We want to leave a legacy so they'll enjoy what we've been enjoying for thousands of years without interference before contact. And what the government is so famously good at is when they want something, they legislate it. Yet you don't come up here to consult anybody. Sometimes I think reconciliations, there got to be more done to that. It's just another word that's famously used by the governments. It's just like saying to us, okay, we hear you, but we'll do it our way. That has to stop. Not very often we see a government from Victoria or even Ottawa. Nobody from Ottawa comes here. Never mind Victoria. Not unless they want something before election. Maybe I'm way out of boundary here, but I have to put that out. So I'll just leave it at that and tell the people who ask me what's the purpose of fish fencing without all these technical words. And I'm not as educated as you guys, so it's hard for me to comprehend what's, like Gordy said, some of this just opinion to us. And the facts, like I said, government can legislate what they want, but our ayok is basically set in stone, and that's a fact. No chief can change it, nobody. That's what they call Walchians. It continues on. A chief dies, somebody step up, takes the name, just like our territories, the Lahip. It never dies. That's Walchians. And often emphasized, if the government wants to work with Gitxsan, you guys got to learn our ayok, which is the law. It has not been abolished. And some of them are more stringent than the European laws were out there now. And the Indian Act, to tell you the truth, is really a repressive law. Literally. The federal government always pride themselves as being compassionate. They send millions of dollars to other countries, yet they forget to hold back to our being the indigenous people. You hear it all across Canada. Maybe I'm way out of line and say I'm sorry to Gordy and the rest of the people sitting on the table here. But I have to bring that up. It's frustrating. Thank you.
I've got 28 minutes. Simiet ser man coach. I was listening to the federal employee. We have one thing in common out of 15-minute, 20-minute comment. We have one thing in common that I picked up, is to make sure that there's abundance of fish for the future. You hear Robin about the teachings of our ancestors. We've been here for thousands of years, and we were taught to respect both the ocean and the land, respect fish and wildlife. We were taught to, if we go camping, make sure that we leave that camp as natural as possible. With our teachings, I'm a commercial fisherman all my life. You know, when you go out commercial fishing out in the ocean, when the weather's really good like this, not a real sunshine, you don't get too much fish. The fish dies when it's too hot. They go down to the colder water. And when the storm hits, oh, we fish are plain. That's when we catch fish. You look at Gordon's presentation this morning. It's like he said, it's just a piece of it. There's a lot of factors. That's why we're having a fish crisis now. You look at the railway, but I would say more than 80% of the railroad cuts off our trees. They're right beside the river all along, not just in Skeena, but right across BC. Fish got nowhere to hide when it's sunny day. It's hot. And then the highway, same thing. Most of it goes along the river. There's no trees to hide, no shade. Forestry, the same thing. The culverts, we've been telling to put in half-moon culverts. I know there's some forestry roads that have culverts, round culverts, and the fish habitat spawning area goes through there. And they can't go through it because the water comes down the end of the culvert and they're stuck there. They can't go up to the fish, to the spawning area. So forestry has a big impact on our the amount of fish that's returning because they're not spawning. And fish fence, it's our beliefs versus the scientific information that you provided this morning. Our ancestors, they make sure the river, there's no, if there's a log there, they take it out. So the river stays the same. Now that the logging and highway and stuff like that, where they spawn, there's a log jam now. And then the river diverts all over the place. So with that log jam, the river is so shallow, the fish can't get up to the spawning area. To me, fish fins, the counting stuff at the end of like rabine. To us, to me, that doesn't help. The amount of fish that used to come up there. When I was a small boy back in the 40s and 50s, my mom said that in the summertime, I need fresh fish. Go get me one. No fishing rod, nothing to catch a fish with. I go down to the river, grab one by bare hand, and run home with it. That's how much fish there is back then, because the environment is still intact.
Clean.
So that's the difference between us and the technical. The money that's used for, it's probably a good thing what the Department of Fisheries is doing, but the abundance of fish coming back is still depleting. So I heard in the news that the railway is trying to relocate their tracks, going through tunnels somewhere down the road to get away from the rivers, because they have oil in mind. I think they're going to transport oil. So they're trying to relocate the tracks going through that's how I understood it. It's just a rumor that I heard just last year. I think I heard that. So my first experience in the fee simple line is I went with my in-laws when I first stayed with my wife. They have a fishing hole, Kispiaks River, away from Kispiaks. We have a real nice spot over there. We parked my truck, we got out, walked across this yard, nice, clear. Next thing you know, this guy come out with his rifle. He said, "You guys are trespassing." That's their fishing hole below. And yet, when they come to our fishing camp, that big red dot there, they could trespass from my camp to go fishing. They think they could because they have that license. So it's the same thing as they should respect our privacy on our fish camp the same way they want our respect. If they don't want us to cross their fee simple land and like here, Gordy, it's on Highway of Tears where our fish camp is. We don't know who's coming through. It's dangerous. My dad used to say, animals are grizzlies, moose, you go out in the bush, nothing to be afraid of. Human beings is the ones that you're afraid of. When I go on a trap line with them, if we see somebody coming down the trail, he says, "Ha, be prepared." We don't trust that person that's coming towards us. So we're on the defensive mood until we meet them, talk to them. So with animals, we talk to the animals. I'm a mushroom picker too. I found a nice patch of mushrooms. I'm going off track too. But anyway, I was picking mushrooms and I felt something. But luckily a big moose was standing over me, watching me what I was doing. And my dad says, "Don't panic if something like that happens to you. Don't panic." I started talking to the moose in our language when I was picking after I was done. I got up really slow talking to the moose. because moose is more dangerous than grizzly bears and stuff like that. So, remembering what my dad's teaching was, got my shack and walked away. Here he walked beside me. And then I found a big spruce tree and stood beside it. And my son, I knew my son wasn't too far. Then I hollered for him. Moose looked at me and then he walked away. Stopped, looked back at me. He's probably laughing away at me. I thought. But the an ad is, we can't even fish on another person's an ad. The only an ad I could fish is on my father's side, because we could fish on our father's side of, or hunt on the traditional territory. Once my father dies, I can't get on there, on that land or that fishing site, unless I ask that tribe, on my father's tribe, permission first, after he passes on. That's how strict we are between ourselves. You hear Robbie, you could get shot. If they didn't warn you, traditionally warn each other 3 times. After the 3rd time, they're not going to warn you to put you down. How strict we are in our laws. I've got 17 minutes left. I've got nothing else to say. Thank you for listening.
Vernon, Diane.
Sige mana kabul ko yung Sydney sa manok but also time sa mga kuya Sydney. My name's Ryan and I Lakskik from Gitxsan, and my brother and I Brian told me to scream, so and my brother Vernon used up 5 of my minutes, so anyway, we grew up at the big red dot that you see on that map that Gord has on the board. We have other fishing holes along the river further toward Legate, all the way to Endamal near Gitxsan. But that one there is where we happen to grow up as a family with our Samagit, our chief. So we have vested personal, sentimental value to those spots, because that is our backyard, that is our home. I needed to say this because I spend countless days in that spot today, even in the winter months. Now that I can clear snow better, I'm there a lot. I've personally experienced those trespassers you guys heard about. And they are scary. Some of them have big dogs, a lot of them are foreigners, barely know how to speak English, and they're usually big men, and there's usually about at least 2 or more in a boat, and they're not all, because there are a few respectful people who want to know, just as you want to know about us. You got a little taste of Gitxsan 101 today. I heard it. You got a little taste. And so that's what I do. I'm not aggressive with them. I say, I'm sorry, you are in trespass at this moment. At the moment you stopped your boat and got out on our rock beach, you are in trespass. Oh, but we have a permit. No, we didn't issue that permit to you. Oh, DFO says we can go anywhere on the river. What are you doing? I'm like, we don't have DFO here, sorry. We've never had DFO here. Ever since we grew up in this spot, we've never had them around. I watched my mother and my father tell people the same thing. All our lives we've had to come across this. So this is, I guess, the stalemate we're talking about, is this: we know our ayok, our laws, we know our rights. It's not a privilege, it's an inherent right that we were born with. And now that Samag Iraq and myself, Skayan, have these high-ranking names, we have this responsibility to pass that on as well to our, especially my daughters, because we're matrilineal, and now I have grandchildren. And so now I'm standing up for them, not for myself. I was interviewed last week, and I was asked, is this yours? The answer was yes and no. Yes, as long as I hold Skayan till I die, yes, it's mine, until the next Skayan comes along and is one of the caretakers of that spot. So that's how this, your part, that you have to understand this somehow. We didn't inherit it from our rich uncle. We inherited it when we were born until we die, and then the next one takes on that title and looks after it for the great grandchildren and the future. So there's just one more comment, maybe two, that I have a lot of comments, and I can get really passionate about this because I live out there, I live it, I work on fish, and I run a language and culture camp, and I passing down as much knowledge as I can to the younger generation. And so I work very hard at this, and I'm very passionate about it, the language and the culture. And so another response that I receive all the time when I come across these trespassers is, oh, I've asked permission. From who? Oh, so and so. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not the right chief. Or, oh, you got it from the band. Oh, I see, that's a chief counselor. That's not a chief at all. They're in there, they're elected, and they're out till the next chief counselor comes along. So they don't have that right to give you that permission. There's that confusion with the non-Gitxsan and the non-First Nations that they figure they got permission from somebody. It's make sure. Brings me to good segue into the fish fence. This fish fence that we're talking about. We have to make sure that there's an agreement somewhere. I'm sure you have it in your records. Who signed the agreements? We're trying to find out. We're doing a little bit of research with that, and the Gitnia were supposed to come back, invite us back to a meeting to look at this agreement and the maps and who signed it. Why is there a fish fence that could potentially be on, it seems to be on a border of somebody's Lahyip, which might be on the Laskik Lahyip. I'm not sure, but it sounds like it's right at the border of someone. I'm not positive because I'm still learning, but so that has to be looked at. Yeah, science and your numbers, that might help, but you still have that to figure out and consult with the proper rightful owners of that spot. So I think that's all I needed to. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of time here. I'm here as an observer. I sit on the GITS governance table along with the other Western chiefs, and so I'm kind of keeping an eye on Robin and Norman there, who are two of the reps from our table that sit at this table with the crisis management team. But I'm very passionate about fish. I'm very passionate about our language, our culture, and who I am. I live it, and I love to eat fish. Very, very worried about how low our river was this year. I've seen it decline over the years, but this year was, wow, you could almost there's just, it's just getting more narrow. And when these guys, these sports fishermen, which is against one of our laws, we don't play with fish, you heard it today, and they're walking on our beach, which could be a spawning bed, and you know, they're ruining just that alone. These little fish might be, you know, trying to get somewhere. And there's just so many, because, you know, it was the first time I was offered money too this year by someone from a guide from Paris, well known, he had a strong French accent. So I asked him questions. I said, you're trespassing right now on this beach. He said, oh, everybody knows me, you know, I have these people and they paid big money, can we make a deal? I'm sorry. You know, and the other guys in the boat were, no, it doesn't matter how much you offer. You won't have any fish to fish in 10 years if you guys keep this up. We won't even be having this argument, this discussion, if we continue the way we're going, fish fence or not. So, thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Thanks for having me here today. I just couldn't help thinking, seeing my hand on the wall there in the middle there. I was telling the group last night, one of the last few times she talks to me, she says, yeah, I want to talk to you. You're my son, she says, because she's a brother to my mom, not my mom, my dad, yeah. And in our language, she said, I'm speaking out of the grave, she said. You know, we have how we've been treated historically, she says. What I'll be saying to you, she says, when you were born, she says, you were born into a fight because the attitude of governments, and seeing all my friends get shipped away to residential school and outlawed this, outlawed that, and she says the whole idea behind that and the Indian Act is to annihilate us. She says, to make us the walking dead, so we're not going to be a problem anymore. And so that was the Yulamo, we call it Yulamo. She's going to plant it in my head. And so on the feast table these days, our head chief sits here and I sit here. So Hawa sits here. And it goes down the line, the ranks go down. And we have an art right across the village. We're original Kispiaks, that's myself. And they are not just like the territories, they all have names, like one of our territories, the headwaters of the Skina, we call it Mitlachbish, and then there's some middle territories, Hansnat, and then there's Chilniding, and they all have histories. They're and I think the lineage with my name, Robert Wilson, he was a very well respected person way back in the early 1900s. He was a very smart person. In the gold rush days and telegraph, he had his own pack train. He had a whole lot of horses. And And then after he died, Jonathan Johnson took his name. Jonathan, he probably worked the pack train of rubber because on the trail, Jonathan fell off for some reason, and then he yanked his hip bone right out, and because there's a lot of swelling, so he laid around Kispiox for about 2 weeks, and the swelling went down, and then the traditional healers, the Halites, they looked at it, and they picked up a big plank and they laid it on his side. They lined up his ball joint, and somebody jumped on it and put it back in. And so I think it kind of shows the resilience of our people. You remember me talking about that they were outlawed at one time, and I used to watch my grandfather sit by the campfire, and I used to ask him, "Are you a Halite?" I said, "I was just a little guy." And he said, "No, I'm not a Halite." He said he was sitting there singing, and he said, "I just provide the rhythm for the Halites." He said, like our little shack is way back. Can't remember what we call that now. Wilpswanus, yeah. And he was always gone in the evenings. That's why I was wondering, well, where did he go like that? And he said, "I'm not the chosen one," he said. Like, the chosen ones are the Halites. They're the ones that do the actual healing. They understand the spirits, he said. All those little rocks you see, they have spirits, he said. Like, that's why we talk to them. But anyway, after Jonathan, he was the one that spent a lot of time with me at our middle territory, and we walked 50 below zero weather. I was just a little guy. We walked at night because the crust of the snow was like that, and I think the reason why they took me out there was all my friends were getting sent off to Edmonton, Port Alberni, and so as an Indian Day School student, I suffered in different ways than the people that got shipped away. And but the upside of my travels, I listened to the language. I listened to the names of the creeks and who belongs here, who belongs there, and even though I felt so cheated in a way, because I always thought, I'm not exactly stupid. I could have been somebody in the white man's world. I could have been. Anyway, after Johnson died, the elders get together and they choose the next Wimuglush, and they chose my uncle George Wilson. Yeah, gee, how could I forget? He was brother to my mother, and and my mother was Hawau, and one of our elders came to see me when George died, And he said, I've already chosen you, he said. And I was just kind of telling you this just to give you an idea how these transfers happen. And I was looking after my dad at the time, and I went home to my dad and I said, I have 2 older brothers, I said, and I think they should be chosen before me. I said, I'm the little guy. I said, I'm the chewingit, we call the end. And Dad said, they probably did look at your brothers, he said. And so the whole clan came together like this, and my mom was making the announcement of sitting me down, and if you think there's something wrong with this guy, said, let me know. That you can say anything you want. That they said, if it's bad, I want to hear it. She says, as far as what I can see, she says, I think we're making a good choice, but don't listen to me. So everybody agreed, and mostly the elders first, then everybody else after. And then my mom said, this is not good enough. She said, she called all the chiefs in the village, sat in a room like this, and she stood me up, and we chose him to be Wimut, she says. And then all the elder kids, you can see in the corner there. A lot of these people were there, and she said the same thing, like did we make a good choice? So they all got up and I think probably Albert was probably the last one to speak, because and she said, I watched him since he was a little boy, and he said he seen me on the land, and then he said he was out there even before that, he said. And he said his diapers are on the land. That's his way of showing the depth of knowledge I have, kind of. And the reason why he said that was back in the days of my babyhood, moss was our diapers. And that's what he said. So he knows something. Yeah, that's I just thought I'd walk you through that just so you get a bit of a picture of how transfers happen, and I think a lot of us, when we get chosen, we're kind of reluctant. We're always reluctant to say, well, jeepers, there must be somebody better than me. But that's what I thought anyway. And thanks for listening. I took too much of your time here, so yeah, thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to ask maybe Patty and then Colin and Amy, if you wish, to provide opinion on what your thoughts are and questions if you have, and then we can all set another date to review, bring some answers if we can.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. As I kind of opened today, it is, I was reflecting after our last meeting, and I meant it when I said it. It is an honor to be here, to be hearing such a rich history and culture, and that is an interface with a government agency that I'm employed with. It's something that I'm keen to learn more about, and having our staff come and learn about Gitxsan culture is something that I'm happy about. I think the work of this table, I'm happy to continue participating. I would also like to say that I'm not sure if a response has been provided by our ministry to the October and December letters. I'm hopeful that if it hasn't been sent, will be sent soon, because the acknowledgement from people in the organization beyond me is important, just so that we can lay out what the future participation can look like going forward. So if it hasn't come, I will follow up and make sure it has, because that's something that's been on my mind, and that's it. Thank you for sharing with me the history and your thoughts around your Anat and the laws of Gitxsan, and I do appreciate that very much. So, thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Colin?
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Don't take too much time now. I'm kidding.
It's okay. I get teased about that, but I'd like to reflect Patty's comments. I mean, it is the first time I've been invited to join the table. I appreciate it. I appreciate the invitation, and more than that, I really I welcome the information and the knowledge, and I understand it's only scratching the surface, and I will endeavor to communicate that through to our staff in Fisheries and Oceans about the importance of taking opportunities to learn what we can about the Gitxsan history and culture. Obviously, we have a long way to go, and my role for Department of Fisheries within the federal government doesn't position me to try to address all of the many issues you raise, and so it's really incumbent on us to try to ensure that we do lay out in the most respectful way we can what we actually are able to do together, and it's often more than what our superiors think. But there is a reality check of who we represent at this table outside of our individual personal beliefs. I represent the federal government and Department of Fisheries, and so it's important, I think, that we search in this shared understanding that we're going through, that we're just starting at, for the best way to start to try to address these issues that you're raising, particularly this access issue, because that does affect some parts of our mandate and some things that the Department of Fisheries does that you've raised. best way to start to share information and get communication processes in place so that we can continue this process of learning and sharing and trying to find things that work for yourselves as well as our responsibilities. And so it's a starting point, and I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
That was really short.
Right on.
Comments? You're good? This process that, just to thank you for your comments, Patty and Colin, and the phrase that I'm looking for is the buck stops here. We sit as representatives of our own WILPs. There's no other people above us as you have, and you call them superiors. And I think the province at one time, I heard them call their superiors masters. We don't have no master, we don't have no superior. This is it. You are dealing with the ultimate decision makers. We consult with our WILPs. We consult with our governance, our tables, the GETS table, the Gigantic table. We are one. So one of the things that just popped up in my head while the chiefs were articulating one of the two quick items. Because my mom said, so what? I'm the musician and run. Because it's bad luck to play with fish. You don't know when the next fish is going to come. Don't mess around with it. And another tradition that I had no clue, and I was young, and I caught my first salmon. It was a coho, and I was so proud of it. Brought it home, and my parents gave it away. And why did you give my fish away? I was hoping you'd enjoy my fish. And that's what we do. They brought it over to the late Amelia and James Angus because it was the very first fish I caught, the first fish I brought home. I was hurt, but I was respectful. Try to understand it. At that point, I did not understand it. So I wanted to share that a little bit. So our last part of our agenda is set next meeting date. So I'd like to entertain any pencil dates that province and or DFO can look at in the very near future. Suggestions, coordinated?
March 20? You have to cancel your appointment again, Charlie?
You're on Idaho that day.
Just before we start dealing with the dates, what we've experienced, and was brought up by Brian yesterday, is that when we're dealing with government, that especially the old farts, they have what, 3 months holidays every year, tenure. And when we have, we're governed by our community, and we have a death. And we can't anticipate when that would be. So that's what we ask, that you accept that as we accept your tenures and while you take your holidays.
Thank you, Gordon. So So, I'd suggest the dates. See, your calendar looks pretty busy.
And they're color coded, depending on which ones can drop off. Double, triple booked.
Okay, so I am committed to be in Haida Gwaii that day for those 3 days. How about the next week?
Yeah, is early April an option just
Early
to get us
April?
through the end of fiscal? It's always a tough time. I've got a signing ceremony to be at on the 20th.
Yeah, I just picked that day up, get the ball rolling here.
How about the 11th of April?
April. We like to keep this monthly. There's no date in March?
I've had a real hard time trying to schedule March. Okay, so there is 28th. I'm just thinking.
Go to 102, spend the weekend.
28th maybe,
March 28th?
possibly 27th. Depends where that is and if I go.
That would be better, the 27th.
Let's see here. That's the.
Because we catch you just when you come up from your holiday and then just before you go into your next holiday. We
No,
catch
hang
you
on,
Wednesday.
hang on. I got a lot of grief over the fall for being away for 6 weeks, first time in a number of decades.
When you look 27th?
I'm going to be in Prince Rupert, but the 29th.
29th?
Yeah.
March 29th?
Yeah, just March 29th.
So I don't.
How's March 29th?
It's okay.
March 29th.
So, March 29th. Location here?
You guys like it here?
This is good.
9 o'clock?
I will make sure I can do it by 9.
Okay.
I apologize.
We
again.
had a discussion about when we had to leave.
It was.
I'll just say I was right.
Sorry, Brian, I'm barging in on you there.
I told you. So March 29th, 9 a.m. here at GTS office, and so lunch is also here. Before we break for lunch, I'll ask.
What's on March 15th?
Right.
March 29th. What we put on the agenda for March 29th?
There's obviously some background work I need to do.
Yep.
And I'm assuming that there may be some room for discussion about your terms of reference and the objectives and process.
There is, yeah. It's open.
Because I would like to come with a little bit of discussion about that.
Okay.
And one of the bits of homework I would need to do is also to check outside of our direct sort of staff and mandate, but interactions with treaty negotiating staff and so on, just to ensure that they understand what this process is all about, so that I would have more of a mandate to provide a departmental response around this. So I've got homework to do on that, but I think the concept of working on a terms of reference and discussing some of the specifics that are tabled there is something that I think is a logical point.
Okay.
And the idea of short-term processes. So what do we do now in terms of the clear difference in kind of perspectives around the access challenges you face? And again, it'll be kind of within the scope of what I have responsibility for, and try to be as upfront as I can about all of it.
Thank you. Robert, you have
What was something happening on March 15th? Anything scheduled there?
We had talked about that for the Gitxsan 102 or 201
Oh, okay.
discussion.
that happening here?
Yep.
What time?
We were looking at around 10 o'clock.
10?
Yep.
Okay. Wondering why I got it marked.
Yeah.
There's so many. Okay, thanks.
Anything you want to add?
That was 1 o'clock?
And
Not at this time.
Different staff too. Okay, I just want to get it clear.
Gordon?
Okay, sorry, Brian. I just want to get it clear with Colin. We're dealing with terms of reference, the access issue, and the short and the long term of that, eh?
To the very best of our ability.
Okay,
That could probably be a full day.
yeah, okay. All right. And then we'll think about somewhere along the line, really formalizing this committee. It depends on both of your participation. So if you get, we'll try and keep you excited at each meeting. And happy. Because Patty's going to sleep a couple times. We got to keep him involved.
Good.
And I'll try to keep my comments brief.
Need a timer.
Thank you all, and som semiga säger man boxen man helt kun och de bara nej som gets vi ska vi nu så det sätt med lessons with. So thank you everyone for being here at this time. We have some lunch here I'd like to share with you, and I'll have Nisi Manu, Robert Campbell, close the meeting and bless the food.
We all stand up, please. There's another saying to the feds in the BC is when somebody asks me something, they say, I got no time. You know what they say? You can make time. Point to ponder. Like I said, nobody ever comes up in our area, so it's about time you guys start seeing how we operate. I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know whether that's a punt or I'm serious. Samnin nuodam tamhagi. Samnin amahilo. Silk satun. Dus patuk sim spadem. Sis amazabel. Stenemalas wala wil hon wala de delsta. Tudupsal wil. Likskigadet. Sis ayochtam. يكتب شيء شبخ ولا دلشم كل شغم تملك يرم بهزم أمور منا يوزوير هيتخد أردنت أمشي بنشتت يعني ما صار لي Prince George إن سماوي تلاقم بقول وناي تم أمقتهن وين and earn it. In Adam, they would hand not about in the mew had I loaded. Tunkin, I should close Jesus, good, no one win. Amen.